Years ago, I found myself deep in a silver mine in Bolivia. I was visiting a friend and we spent the week wandering, eating, exploring, traversing the country by bus, foot, train, cab, any way that we could. We had seen the salt flats, mountains, many old winding streets and squares. We'd stayed at a hostel that gave us unlimited pancakes every morning, which sounded like a great idea until I couldn't even look at them. And then we made it to see this very old but still operable silver mine. It had been in use for 400 years, at one time producing 60% of the world's silver. We headed to the mine on a tour with people from all over the world, dressed head to toe in protective suits, helmets, headlamps, masks, boots, and then we climbed down, 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 deeper and deeper into the mine, ladders, rocks. Into the mountain we went until we found ourselves at the bottom. Hard to conceptualize how far into the earth we had climbed. We sat down on rocks and huddled around a shrine to El Tío, known to be the protector and overseer of the mine and its workers. People brought traditional gifts to offer him as we made our way. Sitting there in front of El Tío, our guide suddenly told us to turn off our headlamps. I had kind of forgotten I was wearing one by that point. I'd gotten so used to it as we stepped precariously down all of those ladders, across unpredictable ground and changing levels. But now, all at once, we turned them off. The darkness that descended as soon as the last headlamp was off was impenetrable. It was the only time I'd understood what it meant to be afraid of the dark. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I couldn't see any of the 15 people I knew were surrounding me. I couldn't see the walls I knew were within my reach in every direction. I couldn't see anything. The darkness with my eyes closed was just as dark as with my eyes open. It felt nearly impossible that I had, mere seconds ago, been bathed in the light of the headlamps of all these people. And then I felt afraid. Suddenly, this thing that I could see and understand was removed, and the fear replaced it immediately. The darkness started rapidly to seep into my bones, through my helmet and mask and uniform and boots, deep, cold, heavy. I'm not sure I could have stood up if I had wanted to. It felt impossibly weighty, this darkness, and lonely. I wanted to yell for my friend, but I couldn't seem to do that either. I was just alone. And that, I always imagine, is the closest I will get to the feeling of the darkness in this week's Parsha. The 9th plague that we encounter in Parshat Bo, this darkness that no one could navigate or really understand. Whenever we get to Parshat Bo, I remember the darkness of the mine. Vayet Moshe et yado al shamayim, vayihi choshech afela bechol eretz Mitzrayim. Moshe held his arm out toward the sky, and thick darkness descended over Egypt. A darkness that it says, Vayamesh choshech, a darkness that could be touched, a tangible darkness. A darkness that felt like it had qualities that were not just those of a natural physical darkness, but of something else, something that felt more sinister, or at least more lasting. In fact, Sforno, the 16th century Italian commentator, explains that when this darkness arrived, it was a moment of rolling back the choshech hativi, the natural darkness of the night, and replacing it. This natural darkness was in some way penetrable. Avir muchan lekabel haor, prepared to interact with light, but this new darkness could not. It was completely impenetrable. And the first way that the Torah describes this darkness is lo ra'u ish et achiv. People could not see each other. Of all the things the Torah could say, but it seems to be a physical representation of a spiritual and psychological truth we know too well. People could not see each other, not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense. As you can imagine, our commentators have spent many generations trying to make sense of lo ra'u ish et achiv in this context. Yitzchak Meir Alter, the Ger Rebbe, the first Rebbe of the Ger Hasidic dynasty, gives us more insight into this. He explains that not being able to see each other was the ultimate darkness because it meant eino mishtatef b'tza'ar hazulat. People could not participate in each other's suffering. They could not share life together because they were so disconnected, so far apart. The people, he says, ein margishim b'tza'aro shel chavero. They could not feel the suffering of their friends and neighbors. That is this kind of darkness, an inability to connect with other people's humanity, a darkness that we all know too well right now, one that houses a fear that is getting louder and louder, a feeling that we are in a moment in which we are getting further away from each other and are being encouraged not to know each other, not to work to know anyone outside ourselves or our small communities. We think about this a lot here, the compulsion of our sacred text to know the stranger. We must know the stranger. But the IKAR Rabbi adds to that. It's not just that we must know the stranger and feel each other's suffering. It's that he lays out very clearly that in not feeling each other's pain and in not connecting with other people, haregesh na'aseh kahau meshutak, people's own feelings become muted and dim. Their own feelings, their own experience of their own lives became muted in the face of not being able to connect with others. The darkness isn't just external and able to be touched, it becomes internal too, threatening to separate us all from our own emotional experience. We need each other to stay human. But in this increasing quiet and isolation, numbness is the feeling that is overtaking so many of us. It's hard right now to not want to be numb. I've talked to many of you in the last couple of weeks who already feel like you're there, your feelings becoming muted and dim, unable to really engage with the world in the ways you were before. I want to be very clear that I am not talking about those in our community who have struggled and continue to struggle with their mental health and fight every day against that kind of darkness. Some kinds of numbness we can lift ourselves out of, and some we cannot. I am talking today about a new kind of numbness and diminishment of feeling that is specific to this moment, that people are experiencing in the face of the endless barrage of news updates and horrors and threats and attacks and shocks to the system, the whiplash of the day-to-day right now. And it seems people have fallen, by and large, into two camps. One camp that is on the emotional roller coaster every hour, every day, high highs and low lows, enraged and outraged, and screaming and crying and fighting and exhausted. And one camp that is already quiet, numb, dissociating, distancing from the roller coaster and also from the rest of the world around them. I need to tell you today that both of these are part of the plan. I need to tell you that both of these will destroy you. I know so deeply in my own mind and body and spirit that the numbness feels like survival. It feels like the only way to get through this. I get it. Believe me. It feels like the only choice we have other than the whiplash and exhaustion and overwhelm. That your nervous system can't take it all and shutting down is the only way. That it is survival. But I have to tell you, it is not. It is instead the same numbness and muted feeling that started to happen to the Egyptians when the normal darkness of the night was rolled back and the new supernatural darkness was rolled in. It is the same numbness that results from sitting in that visceral darkness alone, quiet, and afraid. The darkness of the deep, dark bottom of a silver mine. That is this numbness. It is not a solution, my friends, my community. I have to tell you. We need to fight against it just as hard as so many of us are fighting against the constant catastrophizing and exhaustion and anger and fear and outrage and reactivity with no end. The numbness, too, will not help us right now. When the darkness set in our story, the chaos joined. Chaos we also know too well already in our bodies and in our minds. And then the separation followed, the inability to see each other, to feel each other's pain. And then the inability to feel our own, the inability to feel anything at all. We need each other to feel. We need each other to be human. We cannot shut down, not yet, not ever. We might think our numbness is from an overload of other people's experiences and feelings and communication, but that's actually not quite right. We need to fill our minds and hearts with as much of other people's feelings and pain and joy and love and worry and fear as possible, to deeply know what is going on in their interior lives, to deeply know what they are holding. This will help us remember the beating of our own hearts. This will help us remember our feelings, our pain and joy and love and worry and fear. If we cut ourselves off from each other, we cut ourselves off from the realm of feeling altogether. And believe me when I say we need to feel. We need to stay connected to the experience of feeling something. We need to do that to stay human. That is our job. A job that is going to be hard in the days ahead, a job that has already been hard in recent days and weeks. And we still have to find a way to do it. Because the other option is for our humanity to atrophy, for us to become more and more detached from living in the world, from being who we are, from being friends and partners and coworkers and parents and neighbors and community members, from being connected to the fabric of what makes our lives full. We are going to need to take care of ourselves in ways we haven't had to before. We are going to have to think differently, walk in the world differently. And we will only be able to do that if we are first able to stay human, to not let our emotional experience become diminished, to not let the darkness and our disconnection from others take everything from us. We cannot control everything, but we must control this. We must stay in the feeling world. We must. A week and a half ago, Dr. Vivek Murthy, Surgeon General and friend to this IKAR community, issued a prescription for America, his parting words as he concluded his tenure, helping to lay out in his own words a way to stay human, a way to continue to engage in the world, not to get too swept up in the constant upheaval and commotion and chaos, and not to shut down too much, not to start to feel muted in the ways we are already experiencing. He writes, "As I finish my tenure as Surgeon General, this is my parting prescription, my final wish for all of us: choose community." And then he makes the case for a triad that will help us do that: relationships, service, and purpose. This, he argues, stands in direct opposition to the other triad we increasingly see in our culture: fame, money, and power. He offers us 3 things we can do to sustain ourselves as we feel the darkness making a home in our bodies, minds, and souls. 1, we can lean into our relationships, with one person or with many: a friend, a partner, a neighbor, a cousin, the group of friends from law school that someone told me about this week, a group that takes a trip together every year, 20 years and counting, the group that can laugh together about the silliest things and then cry about the injustices of the world and make plans to fight back. The people who make you feel human, who remind you to feel all of it, the highs and the lows, the outrage and also the joys, to stay connected to feeling their feelings, your feelings, feeling something. 2, we can be of service. We can find a way to give something to the world or our neighbor, our friend. Someone shared with me last week that in her fear and feeling of overwhelm of what to do, she joined Big Brothers Big Sisters and is now mentoring a teenager. She took that feeling and channeled it into service. Come with our community on Monday to OBKLA to help pack meals for first responders who are still fighting every day to make sure that all of these fires are under control and recovery can begin. Show up somewhere. Connect with other people or with this fragile earth we walk on. Stay human. Stay connected to feeling. Feel something. And 3, we can and must find purpose. Why do you do what you do in your life? How do you make meaning of it? You already have so many skills and interests and talents. You already have a little corner of the world somewhere. Find your purpose in it. Maybe it's through work or a hobby or your child or a specific cause that keeps you up at night. You do not have to do everything, and you can't. But you do have to do something. Find your purpose, find your place, and then live that out. Not all at once, but slowly, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. Stay there, focus on that. One small thing, one tiny corner of your life or neighborhood. You cannot fix everything, but you are uniquely positioned to affect something. Dr. Murthy says that this triad of community, is the way that we stay connected to each other in the hardest days. Relationships, service, and purpose. These are the ways we stay human. Lean into that. Lean on us. Lean on each other. Vayet Moshe et yado al hashamayim vayehi choshech afela b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Moshe held his arm toward the sky, and thick darkness descended over Egypt. Lo ra'u ish et achiv. And people couldn't see each other. It was not a deep darkness they couldn't see into, but a disappearance of the proximal, a removal of what had been right in front of them, like I felt when I was sitting in front of LTO in that silver mine. Suddenly, with the headlamps off, everything gone, and I started immediately to feel different, apart, quiet, alone, numb. But I knew I wasn't. Somewhere in me, I knew I was still right there, surrounded by the same people, feeling the same things, heart still beating in the same body. And so when we turned our headlamps back on and started to make our way up from the bottom of the mine, I was desperate for the light I knew was there. I clawed my way back up the ladders and rock faces faster and faster until I saw a tiny sliver of daylight streaming in, very far away and very far above me, but there nonetheless. And then I kept fighting for it. I knew it was there. And it's here too, the light. This darkness is not the end, and we cannot capitulate to it in our attempts to combat reactivity. We cannot become numb. We cannot accept this darkness as all that is, because it is not. Hear me when I say it is not. And for now, that may be all we see, this darkness. And in it, we must remember that we are still not alone. As the darkness starts to settle in our bodies and we feel suddenly removed from everything around us, we are not alone. Reach out a hand and you'll touch someone else, or a wall, or a table, or a chair. We are all still here, together in this darkness. And it may be from this darkness, when the time comes, we have to fight like hell to get ourselves to that tiny sliver of daylight streaming through far above us. That we have to fight and claw and scream and cry and laugh our way back to our humanity. But we'll do that together. Don't drop the hand of the person next to you. And don't stop until you get there. All the way back up to the daylight. I'll see you outside in the sun. Shabbat shalom.